So welcome, our remarkable colleague, Kathryn. We so appreciate your consistent leadership, love, and solidarity. And as always at SETC, we begin all things by giving thanks to our Creator, by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So, Kathryn, can you please share a bit about your remarkable work with our listeners and viewers?
Absolutely. I'm Kathryn Babcock, and I'm the CEO of Capitalw. And Victor, I just want to echo what I was saying earlier about how precious your contributions are to cultivating the ecosystem for social impact. And so thank you for that. So Capitalw was created to move money to the parts of the sector that are undernourished and under-resourced. And we do it at multiple levels. So at one level, we work with charities that are looking to level up, and we help them to do that in terms of fundraising. And then we work with sectors to look at the totality of how they're supported. And we do that through our data work. And then we work with governments and funders in terms of understanding the landscape so that there can be more intentionality around the small part that private philanthropy plays in the larger social contract. So that's what we do.
That's incredible. We've worked together for years now, and your humility and authenticity and humility is truly remarkable because you do so much for so many, and your impact has led to so many remarkable transformations, and not just transactions, but transformations in the ecosystem. So once again, I'd like to say thank you for all that you do for so many. So my next question, what's inspiring you right now in this work? What has you curious, or what's keeping you up at nights?
So I'm really curious about the possibility of creating a transparency such that one day, if I'm sitting in front of my computer or moving in the world, I have investment dollars to spend, I have philanthropic dollars to spend, and I have consumer dollars to spend. And I would love to see a context in Canada where we can on-ramp those contributions, either as a donor or a spender or an investor, in alignment with intentionality towards the Canada that we want to live in. So we've talked a lot, Victor, about the opposite of an extractive economy is an infusive economy. So with every transaction that we do to bring an intentionality of what am I bringing, not what's in it for me, but what am I bringing as a consumer, as a philanthropist, as an investor. And right now the system is quite opaque and inefficient in terms of being able to categorize those things. So Capitalw is working in the data science realm about understanding the social contract as a whole that's held with Canadians. And so all levels of government combined spend close to $1 trillion in a given year. 1% of that is, and philanthropic contributions are 1% of that. So the government's putting in, trillion is 100%. Private philanthropy puts in an additional 1%. What we're working on is how to be intentional about that 1% so it levers the trillion that's there. And most of what is happening in the Canadian context is set by rules. So it's really fascinating to illuminate how this money is moving and the rules that do that. So that excites me that there could be a way in which, and that there currently are ways, if someone is motivated enough to figure it out, how to have all those three ways in which we move money as individuals being intentional. But I'm also excited about, as we have more visibility and understand how that $1 trillion is spent, what the social contract is, where governments by design have moved back to allow private philanthropy. It could be totally different. So for example, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, which is a fantastic organization. In 2022, they received just over $400 million from different levels of government for the institute. Their foundation raised 50 million, 17 million of that was from philanthropy. So that is government creating space for private philanthropy to be funding certain kinds of research. Governments could overnight change their mind and decide they want to get in the research game, and private philanthropy would not have to be there at all. So these are kinds of questions, and it's true for a lot of the hospital. The large players are raising a lot of money because government has removed themselves from that space. But could there be a different configuration? Is this the best use of everyone's resources and efforts? So similarly, for women's shelters, there are 550 of them across the country. Why do they need to fundraise? Prisons don't fundraise. I've never yet been to a prison bake sale. So why are we asking women's shelters to do that? So just looking at everything in the broadest sense of the money is moving according to rules. And to the more we can see the big picture of it, the more we can increase the velocity of social capital and be intentional about how the impact investing intersects with the philanthropy, intersects with the consumption, and bringing it together. So that's what excites me, is that there's increasing possibility to be sort of efficient and intentional in that. The other thing that excites me is that there is so much goodness in the world. And what I tell my daughter is that as long as terrible things make the headlines, terrible news makes the headline, it's the anomaly. It is the collective sadness about this, the fact that it's still news, right? Because essentially we are good. Now, angels and alley cats, for sure, we all have that capacity. But essentially there's so much more goodness in the world. And I see all of the work. I mean, just looking at the board behind you as an example of all these incredible organizations doing incredible work, and the 600,000 Canadians that sit on boards of directors, of all of this goodness, and all the people that volunteer, and all the work that's being done, and people thinking about it, and it's just, there's so much that is good, and I find that promising in terms of our survival. I'm optimistic. As a fundraiser, you have to be optimistic, right? Yeah. So I'm optimistic about the inherent goodness of humanity. And I use the example, like if I drop something in the subway, like a wallet, there's a wallet on the subway, there's 5 people running to tell me about it before they even registered with it, right? It's instinctive that if we know what to do, we'll do it. And so as there's more clarity around how we can help, I think more help will arrive.
I couldn't agree more. Optimism is so important. One of my colleagues, Adriana from Matrix yesterday, she was talking about hopeful visions. And in terms of the wallet piece, I remember my wife and I, it's like 14, we're like in our mid-20s, and we went out to the club downtown Toronto, on Richmond Street, and she lost her wallets, $200, maybe $180 in her wallets. And the next day, there was a sister, I still remember this because we still know her to this day. She returned the wallet to our house. We could not believe this. Like, she actually looked at the ID, drove her car all the way to Scarborough. Well, those times we were living by Brimley and St. Clair, and drove all the way to East Toronto, rang on our doorbell, and had the wallet in her hand. And we thought it was the most like miraculous thing ever. But that's the point of,
But also the joy that she would have had, right? Like, because when I've done that for somebody, the joy that I have in terms of actually being able to connect and support and be helpful. I mean, we're wired for it, right? This is she had probably more joy than you did because of her ability to do that. And that's where I see the possibility is in the connections, and that we're wired for joy when we are devoted. So.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. So my next question, what challenges and barriers do you face in your work? And what are some of the approaches you and your team take to overcome some of these challenges and barriers? And you may not even see them as challenges and barriers, but that's the way I'm framing it, because I know you well enough. You may want to frame the question.
What? Yeah, no, it's just the beginning of a wonderful relationship in fundraising. No, so what I noticed in terms of challenges is, I mean, I only think it's opportunity, so forgive me. But to me, that there's an opportunity for the social sector to be more efficient in terms of, there's 85,000 charities, there's multiple things that all the charities have to do. So I think there's opportunities for efficiencies, shared services, collaboration, organizing around issue as opposed to being a particular organization. So started early work around what collective resource development looks like, so that every organization coming to the table is stronger for being there, but they are collectively doing something together that they can't do on their own. Because I think that sometimes individual charities are put into a position of hubris of having to claim the ability to do all manner of things, which in order to procure funding, and it's very challenging to deliver because that's not the way things work. There's not a causal connection. It's 65 things happening in an ecosystem. So the idea of bringing groups together and resourcing collectively, to me, is a real opportunity, because there's a siloed and a competitiveness. But I also believe that the frame, like that the system is not dysfunctional, it's perfectly functional for the results that it's getting. So to understand the results that are here, and that there's a scarcity model that drives a lot of the impedes, I think, progress. So one of the things that we do when we go into an organization where we're starting to help them with fundraising is ask them, if money was no object, what would you want? What would you be doing? And just taking that moment of like just getting out of the already limiting yourself out of the gate because of the constraints of resourcing. Just say, no, what could we do? Like, what is actually possible? And then working backwards from there in terms of resourcing it. So I see it that we're under these prescribed rules about what's possible, and we don't have a moment to lift up our heads and imagine, if money was no object, what would we do? And could we do it? Because that's, to me, the more interesting thing. If it's true that, quantums of resources could solve a problem like food insecurity, let's get let's do it, right? And so when we look at how an entire sector like food security is capitalized, how much more of it do we need in order for it to be enough? And what could be possible if there was enough? So I just think relieving the sector of a scarcity model, which is by changing the way we look at it, will free up intellectual capital and the visionary capital that started the charities in the first place, and all of that incredible energy, right, to imagine something. So, and that's what you're the gift that you've given, Victor, in terms of all of the, as we call it, the 1,000 cups of tea over the years of like just sitting and being nourished by different perspectives, as I am nourished by you and the people that you brought to the table, because it's life-giving. And so how can we be intentional about how the social economy moves to be infusive and life-giving and connected?
Ashe, ashe, ashe. Thank you so much. So my next question, do you have a set of key priorities right now in your work?
Working on Capitalw has financial data on charities for the last 5 years, and I'm working on intersecting that with understanding the $1 trillion spend and how that interfaces. So a priority to get clarity in terms of how the money moves is the broad strokes of it. And down at a community level is helping the priorities to help charities not be struggling financially anymore. And what I'm working on is helping funders to understand that if they invest in resource development talent on behalf of the causes or the organizations they care about, they are going to put them in, they're going to allow them to thrive in a way that they can't imagine. Because right now in the fundraising context, fundraising is very expensive. And it is not a level playing field. So a lot of the hospitals and universities who are wonderful, they have magnificent fundraisers, very disciplined and very specific, prospect research, major gifts, medium gifts, annual giving, and in community organizations, you'll have a generalist maybe. But also hospitals and universities, they have alumni, or they have, patients that were there, whereas community organizations don't have, they don't have any buildings to put names on, they don't have any alumni to talk to, they're really working in a different realm. And how do we bring the revenue strategy to those groups so that they can to step outside of struggle. So this is what I'm really interested in, and doing a case study for funders about, so for example, one of the things that motivated Capitalw to come into existence is that 10 years ago, when I left the Canadian Women's Foundation, I went to the Canadian network of shelters and transition houses, because they had one $80,000 government grant, and they were at the risk of closing. And what I did for them was I said, I'll come in and do a revenue strategy for you, and then I'll go out and execute it for you. And if your organization revenues ever get to X, then you can pay my fee. And if not, it's pro bono. And I did that to kind of get around the fundraising professionals. You can't work on commission as a fundraiser, so I structured it that way. And they were able to, within 2 years, have their operations covered by private philanthropic gifts. And they've grown year over year over year. And in the last 2 years, they distributed more than $50 million on behalf of the government of Canada to respond to the COVID crisis. And so when I realized that if I have the capacity to do that, then there's a moral imperative to do that, because there are so many things that I can't do. For example, sit in front of a survivor and help them get on their feet. Like I would be like, I'd be under my desk, like, but I'm a revenue strategist. I can do revenue. And I just feel like there's a moral imperative to, if I can, then we must. And so I, brought a team together that's good in terms of every way that money can move to a charity and to a sector. And I'm really interested in bringing that to kind of under-resourced, undercapitalized parts of the sector. And that is so the priority is to work with groups or pieces on the margins that so that they can be well resourced, because their work is so profoundly important. And then at the macro, it's to continue with the data work to understand how it all fits together, so that there can be an intentionality in terms of how we're moving our philanthropic capital.
That's incredible. And thank you so much for the narrative. A lot of times, like, we're a people of oral tradition, all cultures, all communities. And I think a lot of times when folks share a narrative that's very specific, it amplifies a message, but more importantly, it grounds it. So once again, I appreciate your candor, your leadership, and what you do. Yeah, and I love that piece around just the moral imperative. When and that's a conversation that I have all the time with my sons. So once again, I give thanks for your leadership. So my next question, how do you feel about the future of philanthropy in Canada? How do you feel about the future of capital flows in Canada? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? I know it's a silly question.
What do you think? What do you think? Yes.
I'm certain you're optimistic. I'd like to hear why you're optimistic. That's probably a better question.
Yeah, I'm optimistic because of the wonderful people in this country that are thinking deeply about this and connected globally around this, and because there's a mind shift that's shifting towards the joy that comes from connection and altruism and being above more than ourselves. And it's interesting to me, like mystics of every religion from time immemorial have all agreed that we are one, that we are connected. And there is no separation ultimately at some level. And so it's our collective liberation, and which is what I learned from you, Victor. So it's like we're all in this. And once you know that, why would you want to do anything else than be intentional in terms of and the idea of there being a scarcity of money is a construct, right? So it's abstract. It's not and so this is what, so I just like that mind, that leveling up of what's possible. Interestingly, like philanthropy is on the decline, primarily because religion is on the decline, like organized religion. But there's an emergence of kind of spirituality and kind of a oneness and interconnectedness. And so it will be, how does that parlay into taking care of each other? And also understanding as like we have non-voluntary contributions in Canada to the tune of $1 trillion in terms of tax as a taxpayer. This is a social contract and it's non-voluntary. And then how are my voluntary contributions going to amplify that and move that forward? So although private philanthropy is tiny compared to government, it moves that money, it levers that money. So it's a moral imperative to understand the flow of capital. And I think it's as all the people that are working on that in terms of the social value, social purchasing, as all of that comes together, people will do better when they know better. And it feels amazing. So I think it's going to be awesome.
That's one of my daughter's favorite songs. Everything is awesome. So we're on the same page. So my second question.
Got a question. It's all good in the end, and if it's not good, it's not the end.
Yeah, that part. So my second last question: what is your ultimate goal, and what does success look like and feel like to you?
My ultimate goal would be to be part of creating that a world where it's easy to spend, invest, and donate money towards a world that we want to live in. And understanding money and how it moves, so it can move it more intentionally. Like this to me is wonderful. I'm really excited about the emergence of nonprofits that function as businesses, that are able to kind of come up with a value proposition that generates billions of dollars, but their intention is social purpose. I'm excited for the next generation of entrepreneurs that don't have to have social put in front of their name. That because having the gift of being able to organize with a view to being profitable is a gift. It's not everything. It's not common. And so to have like the Patagonia piece, like if you are able to do something, then you're able to in perpetuity support things that you care about. So what I'd love to see in the world is entrepreneurs who create businesses that check off all the boxes of business in terms of profitability, ethically, of course, but that entrepreneurial minds are put into how do we create products and value that people want to do, and we understand profitability and scale, and have all of those things be about social purpose, including the profit. Like to me, that's interesting. So it's part of that integration. So it's not like we're going to go make money over here, however we do it, and then we're going to give our percentage to community investment, but like an integration, right? That we're all moving with clarity in the direction. And I hope that we can get there sooner rather than later, because I think later is a bit scary.
Yeah, The later is definitely creates anxiety and trepidation for many. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. So my last question, do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action for our listeners and our viewers?
Well, if you've made it this far, thank you. So for the two of you remaining, so one of the things that I put out there in my is one of the ways to support the most marginalized communities around the world is when you're traveling in hotels, the cleaning staff or your maid or whatever is likely amongst the most marginalized groups in the country. And so to be really intentional about doubling or tripling the amount of a tip that you leave as a kind of a direct cash infusion. And I did some modeling on that pre-COVID. And if everybody took that pledge to double their tips in the hotels where they're staying, it could it aggregates really quickly. And so that's what I would say. The next time you're in a hotel, just be double or triple the amount that you're leaving for the cleaning person, and as a practical way of cash infusions where it's needed most.
Ashe, ashe, ashe. Final story. Easily 10 years ago, had a lecture in Toronto at the Jamaican Canadian Association, 995 Arrow Road. The lecturer left $1,100 USD in an envelope in the hotel room by Western Road and Finch. Checked out of the hotel. We left, we went downtown to One Love Vegetarian to feed him, and he realized he left the money. Said, brother, listen, you're on stage in 2 hours. We have to, listen, brother, we got to go back. We went back to the hotel. He's already checked out. All the doors are open. The envelope was on the table. We embraced, we couldn't believe it, and we found the woman, Spanish sister, that found the money and removed it from where it was and put it on the table. Could not believe it. Gave her the biggest tip ever. But yeah, there's another miraculous story that I had to share about the audacity of kindness and goodness in this world. Like I would like we could not believe that this woman put the envelope by the TV, the door open. You know?
But imagine for a moment, Victor, though, that $1,100 had been left as a tip for her, given her, and for those for people that are in, a context where the $1,100 is, a rounding error, it would be life changing. But not life changing. I don't want to overstate it. It would be impactful, right? I don't want to have hubris about anything. But before I travel, I intentionally reduce expenditures that week in terms of the amount of kinds of groceries I'll buy or whatever, so that I can more intentionally transfer something to people wherever it is I'm going to be. And there's just something about the intentionality of being, again, back to where we started. The opposite of an extractive economy is an infusive economy. So the more I can be conscious of, infusing to the taxi driver, the tip to the taxi driver, and that moment of connection when they look up and they're so surprised at how large it is, and you're like, I see you, I appreciate you, and so the more and that's such joy for me, right? It's not like, and so this is where I am optimistic, because that's where the good stuff is, and where the good stuff is where it's good for everyone. So
I couldn't agree more, and that's probably the karma of yeah, because I'm also a big tipper, so maybe that's why I always find when I lose it.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah, it comes right back. It comes right back. Givers never lack, as my grandmother would used to say. Givers never lack. Kathryn, it's been an absolute pleasure. I so appreciate every conversation we have, and I think that the conversations we had over the years, this is the first one that we've intentionally recorded and documented. So that's a blessing. I just appreciate everything you stand for. Your family, your faith, your dedication to community, your dedication to your work, your dedication to this ecosystem, and you as well are a precious jewel in the ecosystem and provide such value and infuse such love, grace, mercy, compassion, empathy, and diligence. Yeah, so I
Wow.
appreciate your
I don't
leadership.
know about diligence, but humor for sure.
Humor is one of the things, but diligence, you follow up with the best of them, just like me. So I appreciate you for all that you do. And as
I
always,
got that.
we close the way we began by giving thanks to our creator, by giving thanks to the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We give thanks and honor all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Thank you so much, Kathryn. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.